With the 7th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Las Vegas Raiders select Tyree Wilson, defensive end, Texas Tech.
All right, Myles, so let's go ahead and start with the most important position, and that's quarterback. And you have teams that are reportedly able to trade up, like the Vikings, who have 2 first-round picks, the Giants, who are at pick number 6. But the Raiders are kind of a dark horse. They don't have that kind of ammunition. How plausible do you think it is that the Raiders actually leap up the draft board and give a king's ransom in doing so?
Well, I think it depends on where you're thinking that they might go. If they're going to try to go up to number 2 overall, I mean, that's going to take a lot, you know? I mean, think about, you can go back to 2016 where the Rams and the Eagles both traded up to number 1 and number 2 overall, respectively. And that did take a king's ransom in order to do that. And now you also had varying degrees of success with those quarterback trades, right? I mean, yes, you can say that Jared Goff did help the Rams get to the Super Bowl in 2018, but that took a new coach, right? And then it took a new quarterback for the Rams to then eventually win the Super Bowl. And yeah, the Eagles won the Super Bowl for drafting Carson Wentz, but they did it with Nick Foles. So you have kind of 2 trains of thought there where, all right, yeah, you can go and you can do that and you can maybe have some success, but I think it's more realistic if the Raiders are going to try to get up to, let's call it, I don't know, 5 to 7 in that area. And some of those teams are not going to be inclined to trade with the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, you know, you've got the Chargers in that mix, but I think if you're talking about that and you're maybe getting one of the, let's call them tier 2 first round QBs, whether it's a JJ McCarthy, it's a Michael Penix, maybe Bo Nix, and that maybe that would make more sense. But then if you're thinking about it, would you just stay at 13? And can you still get one of those guys? So the Raiders do have a lot of options, and it kind of depends on whether or not they've fallen in love with the guy and whether they believe that they have to go up and get him like that.
I would say the talk around Raider Nation is that if Jaden Daniels gets past Washington at 2, because we know Washington is not trading out. Patriots,
right?
Maybe they do. But if Jaden Daniels is there at 3, does his former college coach and Antonio Pierce give away 3 first-round picks to go up to get him? Do you see Jaden Daniels as a generational prospect that makes that kind of move worth it for the Raiders? And if so, why?
Well, I think he's one of those guys that is so dynamic. You know, you watch him play at LSU and you see his highlight tapes. And there's a reason why he won the Heisman Trophy, right? I mean, this is a guy that can throw the ball really well. He can run the ball really well. But he's also got that sort of recklessness to his play a little bit that you might want to take out just a little bit once he gets to the National Football League so that you can make sure he stays healthy. Now, it's better, I think, to try and pull back on a guy than to try and say, hey, we need you to go do more. We need you to go do this. Because at a certain point in a game, right, you know, it's 4th quarter, it's this, it's that, and you're down and you need a big drive. That's the kind of dude you want on the field who you know is going to do everything he possibly can to make a play for you. But, I mean, between, you know, quarters 1 and 3 and you're in week 3 and you're playing whoever, it's like you don't necessarily need to take as many risks. So I think given the history, sure, the Raiders would be well served to go up and get him if they can do that. Now, we're talking about 3 first-round picks. You are certainly mortgaging the future, right? But if you get that quarterback, who cares? You know, that solves so many other issues for you once you get that quarterback and you get him in your system and you realize, okay, this guy has completely transformed our franchise. I can't, you know, fault a team for trying to take a big swing like that, especially if, you know, if it doesn't work out, you know, you at least tried, you know. And so that's something where I understand the criticism that people give, but when you're doing something like that and you're trying to get to a championship level, you've got to take risks sometimes. And that's one that I think it might be worth taking.
Yeah, now based on public perception, you're not going to have J.J. McCarthy or a Drake May falling to 13 for the Raiders to scoop them up there. And it seems through that public perception, mock drafts, reports, yada, yada, pro days, all that good stuff, that the Raiders wouldn't really mortgage their future for those guys. But Jaden Daniels, that's a possibility. Do you see that the same way? Or do you actually think that J.J. or Drake could be an amazing fit for the Raiders?
Well, I actually I see it more that way, in that Jaden Daniels would be that guy that if Washington were to pass and the Patriots were inclined to trade out, then that's somebody that you would go get. Now, that being said, the Patriots have an obvious need at quarterback. And so if Washington were to pick a Drake May at number 2 overall, or JJ McCarthy, because if you believe what's been said, JJ McCarthy is one of these really, really good quarterbacks. And it's not necessarily something that you saw at Michigan, given what he was asked to do, but he did still win a national championship. And, every time I hear, oh my gosh, JJ McCarthy, one of the best pro days I've ever seen, it's kind of like, well, I mean, the quarterback should be doing a great job at a pro day. And another one of the best pro days we've ever seen was Zach Wilson. That didn't necessarily work out all that well. So I don't know. What did you see on the field? What does the tape say? That to me is a little bit more important. But I think to get into your question, really, I think Drake May, JJ McCarthy, those guys are not necessarily going to be as franchise changing coming in the door as you would with a Jaden Daniels. That's at least my perception of it. And, obviously Caleb Williams is 1-1, right? So it's like, that's why we can take him off the board, because it's been very clear that he's going to be the number 1 overall pick for a number of months. And then the Bears basically removed all doubt by trading Justin Fields. So if they were not inclined for some reason to pick Caleb Williams, that'd be the guy where you're like, oh my gosh, we have to go get him. I think Jaden Daniels is just a little bit of a tier below that, where you see him play and you understand that he's so dynamic that he can be that kind of franchise changer. But when you're talking about some of the rest of these guys, it's not that they're bad quarterbacks. And so much about it is going to be, can they get to a place that's going to be the right system for them, right? Can they get to a place where the coach is going to be the perfect fit for them, where the offensive personnel is going to work well for them? Because that is so much of what then lends itself to being a successful quarterback in the NFL.
No doubt about it. And if you look at 13, if the Raiders were to stay there, it seems like there's a massive tier break after JJ McCarthy, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and the next guy, be it a Bo Nix or Michael Penix, might not go until late first round, if not early round 2. But sitting there at 13, and you have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell in the building, from what you can tell about the Raiders situation, what AP has said through the offseason, how urgent do you think it is, and how tempting do you think it's going to be to press that button and take a Penix or a Nix?
I think it would be tempting, but if you feel like you can trade down and then still get a quality quarterback, then you also would be tempted to do that, because the Raiders still have needs, right? I mean, there are other positions on offense where you look and you say, they could get a little bit better there. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Devontae Adams or Jacoby Myers, but when you're in a division with Patrick Mahomes and you're in a division with Justin Herbert, right, and you're in a division with an offensive mind like Sean Payton, you know that you're going to need to score points. So is receiver a need? No, but it's something that would enhance that offense, and it would be nice to have. So can you get a receiver if you trade down, right? And then you also get another quarterback that might be a little bit more developmental, but then you also have another weapon around him that kind of changes the equation and changes a little bit of the math of what it is that you're doing and how it is that you're trying to build a team. So I can see the Raiders trading down if somebody that they love is not on the board, but I could also see them using that 13th overall pick on a position that we don't necessarily think that the Raiders need to address right now, right? I mean, quarterback obviously is the one where you think about it and you say, well, they don't have a franchise guy, but an offensive line, you can never have enough offensive linemen, right? Can you address right tackle? Can you address cornerback? Can you address somebody else on the defensive line, right? Can you get Max Crosby some more help at outside rush? Yes, you have Tyree Wilson, but he didn't necessarily play all that much last year. So there are a lot of things that I think the Raiders can do and a lot of options that they're going to have at 13.
Now, outside of quarterback, because we've heard of a lot of whispering about Michael Penix to the Raiders, be it at 13 or with a trade down. And it seems like a perfectly good fit, a guy that Al Davis would have loved as well with that big arm. But the other positions, when you look at the tackles, the Tyrese Fufuga, and all these other tackles out there, Olu Fashanu, are there certain prospects that you've heard are really good fits for the Raiders?
Well, I think, first of all, Penix seems to be one of those guys, right? And the thing that is interesting about him is the injury history, and that is a little bit of a concern. And it's not that you really want to knock a guy for being injured, right? But as players say all the time, the best ability is availability. So, especially if you're talking about the QB position, if you cannot rely on the QB to be available, then that's going to be a problem, right? So that's where I do think that Penix is a good fit for what Luke Getsy could want to do as an offense. But at the same time, you got to be a little bit wary of that injury history. And that is one of the reasons why he might fall a little bit further down some draft boards. But, I think that whenever you're talking about the Raiders now and what the Raiders want, what the Raider way is, I'm hearing Max Crosby talk about this at his press conference, I thought was really interesting, right? You want the guy where you turn on the tape and you say, oh, that's a dog. It's somebody that you feel like, okay, you might need to tell them to pull back a little bit, because that's just who they are. And that's the way they play the game. You want that relentless pursuit. So with Antonio Pierce, I almost feel like that's more of a defensive thing. Whereas, yeah, we know that the defense was good last year. You don't go into Kansas City and shut the Chiefs out on Christmas Day, despite, what all the things that they were going through last year offensively without being a good defense. And yeah, you need more offensively. But I don't think that it's a terrible thing if you were to say, let's double down on our defense and let's make our defense that much better, especially given like we were talking about, all of the offensive prowess that is in that AFC West.
No doubt about it. When you got cornerbacks like Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, I believe, out of Toledo, those are dudes who've been mocked to the Raiders over and over if they were to get another corner in that room. But this is a new era for the Raiders with Antonio Pierce, and this is Tom Telesco's first draft for his rival Raiders because he used to be with the Chargers, right? So is there certain things that you kind of look for in this offseason to kind of identify the new identity of the Raiders by any means?
That's a good question. I mean, I think what you have to look at, honestly, is how a team then adapts and adjusts after year one, because you don't necessarily know what it's going to look like, right, from that perspective of, okay, here is how we do things. When you have a new offensive coordinator in Luke Getsy, that makes something different. Now, defensively, it is more continuity because you still have Patrick Graham. You still have the same sort of principles that were there before when Josh McDaniels was the head coach. But I think it is going to be a little bit different because now it's Antonio Pierce's vision starting from jump. Right, when an interim head coach has to come in the middle of the season and basically take over something that was not theirs, right? It's like you're basically starting off with a half-made recipe for dinner where you didn't pick the ingredients, and now you're saying, well, I would not have done this way. I would have used some very different marinade, but you know what? We're just going to do what we can and make this into the best meal possible. I think Antonio Pierce did a fantastic job of doing that. So now you've got a new general manager. You've got your own ability to basically pick the groceries, or at least set out the philosophy that you believe should be what the Raiders are going to look like. And I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but I think we know it's going to be pretty smash mouth football, right? It's going to be playing with an attitude. It's going to be playing with an edge, playing with relentless passion and pursuit. That, I think, I don't know exactly what Antonio Pierce would describe as the Raider way, but I feel like we're going to see that kind of thing with the Raiders in the coming season. And so from that, yeah, I think it's going to be guys who are going to kind of want to be in the mold of a Max Crosby, right? Somebody who you're going to have to say, hey, like, if you're going to be on this team and you're going to play defense for us, you have to go after the example of what Max Crosby sets, So offensively, it's going to be led probably by Devontae Adams because that's your best player. Before you could maybe say Josh Jacobs, kind of the heartbeat of that. We're going to have to see what that running game looks like. But I do believe that this is going to be a team that plays great defense, going to run the football, and you're going to want to probably get that ball down the field vertically as much as you can, but we'll have to see who the quarterback is in order to make that happen.
Yeah, the Christian Wilkins edition is another showing
Totally.
the blueprint of under Antonio Pierce, right? And fighting fire with fire in that offensive division for sure. But Myles, thanks so much for the time. It should be a very eventful next 9 days, won't it?
Absolutely, no doubt. Yeah, draft time is always one of the great times in the NFL offseason. We finally get to see where these players are headed.
Yeah, can't wait to hear all the smoke, right? Because you know what's coming. All right, Myles, thanks, and have a good rest of the day, all right?
All right, man. Thank you too.